Hello, and welcome back to LIT, Lisa's Initial Thought. I just want to take a few minutes to speak on one having to be reset. And a few people do come to mind. I think about Moses, Paul, Jacob, Peter. The Bible is full of some women and men whom God had to reset for his glory. Let's take a look at Moses. Moses was raised in the courts of Egypt. Moses had been learning much that he had to unlearn. The influence of Egypt, the love of his foster mother, his own high position as the king's grandson, the refinement, the mysticism of false religion, all of this had left an impression upon his developing mind. Now we know that Moses was set upon the water to escape the slaughter that Pharaoh had ordered on any child that was 2 years old and under, because he had heard of a deliverer that would deliver the Israelites from under his rule. And we know that Miriam, his sister, put him in the basket and put him upon the water. And we know that Pharaoh's daughter was the one that found him, and she raised him in the courts of Egypt. But one thing that I do want to point out also was that Miriam followed that basket. And by following that basket, she was able to tell Pharaoh's daughter, I know someone that can nurse him. And she told her okay, and she took him right back to his mother. And so his own mother was able to raise him. And I believe to the age of 12, his mother raised him. So she nursed him. She taught him the Hebrew culture. So he was actually raised for the first 12 years within the Hebrew culture. And then taken from there at the age 12 back to the courts of Egypt. And there is where he learned the Egyptian culture in its fullness up until his adulthood. And we know the story. He's out one day, and an Egyptian is, I believe, trying to hurt, Hebrew, and Moses slews the Egyptian, and a Hebrew sees it and threatens to tell, and Moses, I believe, gets scared, and then he takes off running, and he finds himself in the wilderness for about 40 years. And out here in this wilderness, Moses meets Zipporah, who is his wife, and they are sheep herders. So Moses now becomes this shepherd. And here's where God now has to undo all that Moses had learned in the courts of Egypt. Because a shepherd is someone that's very humble. A shepherd is a caretaker. Where Moses thought about himself, now he had to think about someone else. He had to become compassionate. He had to become long-suffering. Someone who had been raised to have someone serve him is now doing service for someone else. So he's now out here undergoing this life change, this alteration to his life under the watch care of God. And all along, God is preparing him to lead his sheep out from under the rule of Pharaoh. God had to get rid of the old man and make him anew. And there are times where in our lives, God has to reset us. He has to take out that old man and make us anew. You know, Paul also, remember Paul talked about, this old man that was in him. Remember, Paul even said in over there in Acts, boy, the things I want to do, the things I don't want to do, I'm doing. The things I do want to do, I'm not doing. Or it may have been in Romans 7, excuse me. Sorry about that. But, Paul struggled with that as well, having to make those changes. But there are times, like I said, where God has to push the reset button. And I'm sure it was not easy for Moses to have to undo all that he had learned. But the beauty of it all was that he was willing to be retaught. He was willing to undergo the change. He was willing to do that. And along with Paul and Jacob and Peter and the many others in the Bible, they were willing to undergo the change. And that's what we've got to be willing to do, undergo the change. And, another one that comes to mind is David. David says, create in me a clean heart and renew a right spirit within me. David was willing to undergo a change. And that's one of the things that we always have to be ready to do. And we have to allow God to do whatever it takes to make that change in us. So if you're ever looking to maybe advance in life or wanting God to use you for something and maybe it hasn't come up yet and you're wondering why you desire a position even in the church or wherever and it hasn't happened yet, and God sometimes got to get you ready for it. You got to get ready for it before he can give it to you. So slow down and allow him to do what he needs to do. And that way, when you get it, you know it's yours. Because you're ready to do it and you're ready to do it with all the tools that you need to get it done. So I just wanted to say, don't ever get to the point to where you're not ever willing to be reset, because it's not a bad thing, especially if it's for the glory of God. Thank you for listening to LIT.